Hello, John. I think we're going to start. There may be one or two people who have still arrived. I want to welcome you all, both here in the room and online. And say that I'm very excited to be in the back today. I'm actually doing it because, due to unforeseen circumstances, the chair of the Computer Arts Society, Sean Clark, he's not actually in the room. But without any the most important thing, I suppose, is to say thank you to the Society in whose premises we are here tonight. And thanks to Jeff David for organising the event. We're going to be monitoring the questions that come in through Zoom. We'd like to invite everyone who is listening on Zoom to maybe ask questions throughout rather than waiting for the question at the end. Not that we'll ask the questions throughout, but it's good that we have them ready and waiting to make sure that we don't miss anything. So the order of play is that we have Alex presenting first, Alex May, followed by James. And they'll both speak for 20 minutes, and then James and Alex have invited me to engage in a conversation with them about some of the things that are implied both by the theme of the event, which I'll just run through, as well as from what emerges from what they present to us, and then we'll open up for questions. And as usual with these events, we'll go next door after it ends for some drinks and further conversation. And we would really like to invite everyone to join in the conversation tonight and ask as many questions as you like. I hope we'll finish probably in about an hour and 20 minutes. I think it'll be something like that. So move fast and break things, control progress and the black box. Considers the role of the artist in an age of automated and opaque black box AI systems. With two contrasting artistic approaches, structural control and systemic rupture, will explore agency, automation, failure, authorship, and responsibility in computational art and culture. This was designed by the artists, I should say. So Alex himself, Alex May, is an artist whose work examines how people remember and how technology changes what we keep, what we lose, and what we think is real. Working across moving image, photography, sculpture, and computational processes, with parallels between human experience and technological systems, recording, storage, and preservation. Informed by more than 4 decades of programming experience, his work uses technology not simply as a tool, but as a way of thinking through how reality is shaped, altered, and re-experienced. Alex's work has been exhibited at Arts Electronica, ZKM, ATC in Basel, MIT Museum, Nobel Prize Museum, and Tate Modern. He also has work in several collections, including ZKM and the Computer Arts Society. James Bloom uses technological innovation as a method to generate conceptual problems. He takes complex code-based and material production techniques and combines them in unintended ways, often to the point of failure, triggering new states. His software artworks change in real time and often connect to hundreds of participants online, but have functionality engineered out, upending the structure of the systems they exist within and revealing possibilities for autonomy. James is exhibited at ZKM, Museum of the Moving Image in New York, Abu Dhabi Art, and Kunstrum Heiliggeist, among others. His works are in the permanent collection of ZKM and the Francisco Carolina Museum. So thank you all, and let's welcome Alex.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for coming this evening. So I'm going to talk about a couple of projects that are going to sort of talk around the issues that we've sort of outlined, sort of how we relate to technology, how we use technology, how I use technology as an artist, and how I sort of explore fundamentally kind of what it's kind of like to be a human in this time of AI and creativity from inside the systems. And I find myself keep coming back to thinking about AI in terms of time. It's like a sort of time compressor. We can achieve things much quicker, and sometimes this is fantastic because things like cancer screening. We want to process a lot of information very quickly and accurately, and AI is a fantastic tool for doing that. Where it comes into things like we're able to produce creative works in ways that we couldn't before, in much faster. I'm kind of more challenged by, because we don't have the journey in between, the journey of sort of learning. And I think a lot about the filmmaker Andrei Tarkovsky, his preoccupation with the pressure of time, the idea that the time has this kind of pressure that builds, and that if you that we experience time as humans, and this is meaningful. And I will return to this theme again and again. This is why it's so sort of core to my practice, because I think time is a very human. It's core to our being. And as I was thinking back to a talk that I did in 2013, and you'll probably recognise several of these people. Got Frida Nacker and Jean Kogan and Evan Roscoe, Franco, Douglas Dodds, who's from Digital and the V&A, Manfred Moore, and myself. And I asked this panel one question, because I was thinking about this the other day, and I was like, where does the art reside in digital art? And I was thinking about, if I write a piece of code, I have that file, and I compile that piece of code to an executable file, and then I lose the source code. But this still runs, and it still shows the art. Like, where is the art? Where does it reside? And I was thinking, because actually I think, sort of more than 10 years later, that was 2013, I think the art resides in time. I think the art resides in a moment of time. The moment when an artist sort of creates something, and this is everything in their life has brought them to this moment, and they've created something, and it's a kind of marker, and it says something maybe about the technology and the time and what's happening. And so I make artworks that play with time. We play with the idea of memory, pieces like Shadows of Light, which basically start with a black screen. And then you stand kind of facing the screen, and a camera picks up your presence and takes your silhouette and starts to sort of use it like a stencil, like a paint stencil. So the longer you stand there, the more kind of paint kind of drips down. And it's a very slow sort of piece. Like, if you move about, nothing happens, because you're not being picked up by the camera. And every color represents a person who stood there and looked at it. So it becomes a record of who stood there and looked at it, and it becomes a record of sort of looking at yourself. So it's sort of like a digital memory that's formed by its own remembering. And I did this idea of that we're kind of made of memories, and we have these very unique fingerprints. All of us, every single one of us, has been through unique, private, personal memories that we could never share with anyone else. It's like when you come back from holiday and you go, I went to this place, and you show people photos, and they're just like, wasn't there, it doesn't affect me. So I did this piece about being in an alleyway, and this, very difficult to see, but an air conditioning unit that inexorably suddenly has a light come on inside it. And the video is a very slow sort of pan towards this air conditioning unit. By the time you get to the air conditioning unit, the light is gone. And it's like, you never find out why, but it's like this very personal moment. And it's called The Most Wonderful Thing Happened to Me, because it's like that's a gift for you to experience that. And we've all got moments like that in our lives that we carry with us and make us kind of who we are. And I've explored this in different ways, like this piece called Bodybuilding Infection, which was actually about how the immune system works, which is fascinating. And I can't go into it now because it's don't have enough time, but it's really, really interesting system that's just kind of going on in us, and we don't really have any idea. But I use this metaphor of the body represented by the sort of high-rise building, this sort of bodybuilding, and then all of these little characters playing about inside of us. And this kind of also relates to memory, about we are made of memories, we are made of our memories. And it's very obvious when people have neurological disorders, and they start to lose memories, and they start to lose themselves, and they start to sort of disappear. It makes you really aware of how memory plays such a sort of core part of who we are as people and how we define ourselves. So one of the projects which I presented here before, and indeed had an exhibition here, the 20 print exhibition, was my project Algorithm Photography, which is a software-based photographic technique that compresses time. So you take I do, you don't, takes a video of like 5 minutes on a static camera on a tripod, and then the software compresses the 5 minutes of frames, that's 7,500 images, compresses them down to a single image. And because it's software-based and not light-based, you can change how the information is combined. So now we can see like the flight of birds, and the colors here are tourists on the beach. This is Brighton Beach, it's Brighton Pier here, and it's the uneasy balance between tourists buying fish and chips and seagulls waiting to come down and steal their chips. If you come down to Brighton, please buy your chips like this. And yeah, I spent been doing this project for about 10 years. When I travel, go to like New York, for instance, capture the kind of iconic yellow taxis zooming along the street, or ants. These are the paths of ants crawling over a rock. So obviously, I mean, the little thing, but you trace them for 5 minutes, and you start to see the highways and how much they kind of cover. Anyway, I've talked about this before, but this has led on to a new series of work called Object of Time. And Object is spelled like this because it's a blockchain-based artwork that takes place on the object marketplace. I will explain a little bit more about this. But the idea being is that rather than have a camera on a tripod, this now runs on my phone, and I developed a new app that I could actually hold on my phone, which is why all these images are sort of 16:9 sort of vertical, and they play about with again the idea of time, but ranging from, they can be much more sort of abstract, or they can be quite representative, but sort of capturing a sort of more of a feel of time passing. And but importantly, what I wanted to do with this is not just have a picture. Like when you take a photo, it sort of freezes time, and it freezes the position of the photographer in relationship to the scene and everything in that moment. And that's not really how we experience the world as people. Everything's kind of moving and shifting, and we don't remember snapshots, we remember moments, we remember movements. So this kind of process was to try and get closer to that kind of idea. And these were the very earliest ones that I did. The software sort of evolved over the period that I was doing this. But you can see, like, flamingos, and the one in the middle was actually the very first one that I released. And they started being very sort of textual and very sort of, quite abstract at times. And the idea was that I would take one of these images a day, and then I would put it onto this marketplace object, and I would sell it for a very low price. Probably at the time it was about 50p. But I would sell them for 24 hours. So any number of people could buy one, in that 24-hour period. And if no one bought that particular one, I would delete it. And the idea was to play around with the idea of memory. Like, what do we remember that's important to me? How does that grow up to be important to other people? How do stories develop? You know, it's like the if you're sort of standing on a beach and that's a lovely moment for you and it's valuable to you, but it's not really valuable to anyone else. If something happens and then it becomes a story and then you start telling people like, oh, it's a great story, you got to hear the story, it starts to have more value. So I was playing around with the idea of value of these very innocuous little memories. The secondary market now plays out, people buy and sell these images, and some of them have got more valuable and some of them have not. So it's letting the marketplace kind of decide what's valuable, what stories are we going to tell. These are some of my favorite ones where it's sort of capturing more than what's present. So there's a kind of texture there of the grass and the sand and the sky, and it's sort of, this is really pleasing to me. These sort of seeing more than what was initially thought to be there. And these are plastic toys in a sand pit. I didn't realize I was catching the little toes. And it's interesting to take these. I mean, some of them develop their own stories. This was in Chichester. Do you recognise this? Chichester Cross, is it? It's sort of marketplace stone thing. And I wanted to take this photo, so I wanted someone to walk by. So I'd do this, and everyone was so polite, and they would stop. and I'd be like, no, and they'd walk round me, and because it's so damn British. And so what I had to do was wait until someone was kind of like committed going past, and then take, which is why he begins in the middle of the frame, as opposed to like what I wanted was someone. So again, it sort of has a story kind of built into it. And playing around with ideas of aesthetics, like this is some bins in an alley, but I love the light, and I love that it was a beautiful light, beautiful evening, and because the process abstracted the specifics of the image, you lose the detail, which is what we often crave in contemporary photography. We want sharpness, we want resolution, we want as much detail as possible. But by removing detail and averaging out the quality of light, this becomes a very, very much more abstract, pleasing kind of image, which sold quite well, even though it's a picture of bins. This one was I was thinking about, the thing where people take photos of food before they've eaten it. And I thought, well, that doesn't really say how much you enjoyed the food. So what if I take a photo of it after I've eaten it? And there's like, a fish with like blood everywhere. And it was really good fish. And so it was sort of playing with that idea. And this one's the moon in the sky and over some boats and in the marina. And with the idea that the photographer could put themselves into the picture, not by standing in front of the camera, but by the movement of the camera. Like if I did this photo and you did this photo, like it would be completely different. You'd move the camera differently. Like it would be something about my body and your body, the differences, and so it was it's a way of putting myself into the frame, even though I'm standing behind the camera. And this is the last one of this series. Finding these little moments, like we were walking down by the seashore, and there was this red chair that had just been left there, and it was so beautifully contrasting with the other colours, and so I could make it. So this is like a red chair sitting, a red chair standing, a red chair dancing. So just by adding movement, I could give character and give a sort of narrative to essentially an inanimate object, which then disappeared like the next day. So it was very serendipitous there. So I'm thinking about, like, we mediate a lot of our memory through technology. I'm taking a video now where you're watching this. This has all been sort of sent through stuff. We take photos, we take videos, we take all this stuff, and it's all mediated through algorithms. It's all mediated through technology. So if you know, video and image compression, it's absolutely fascinating. I won't go into all the details here, but a little example would be like, this is a, a mid-resolution image, JPEG 100% quality. It's like 2 megabytes. And as you start to reduce the quality, we'll go down a couple of stages. So this is 45%, say, quality. The file size is now only 112 kilobytes. And you start to see jagged patterns in the sky. You start to see that the colors become a little bit less, like what they were. As you go down to 10%, you can see these the colors in the sky really breaking down, and you've got this banding and all this sort of noise. I'm sure you've seen this in videos and things. This is the algorithm struggling to preserve the information, because they work in a very interesting way, because they are perceptual algorithms. They are throwing away information that humans can't see. And as opposed to a compression algorithm that is looking for binary patterns within a data file so it can compress it. It doesn't matter, it just makes it smaller. But with an image, it's going, well, what can humans see? What can humans perceive? And if they can't perceive information, we can lose it. And it's the same for audio. And so when you push it and you go all the way down to 0%, you end up with this kind of really blocky kind of result. And this made me think, what are we losing? What are we losing when we compress things? What are we losing when we use these devices to record information? And I can flip between the original, and so you can see how much information is thrown away. I did a piece called Essence, which was from a residency responding to the ideas of Hokusai, the Japanese artist, but with AI. And I used an image recognition algorithm to take a video and only pick out those bits that the algorithm could recognize. So here it was sort of like, oh, okay, I can recognize fish, but sometimes it thought they were kites and other things. It's a little bit more obvious on this. If you remember that previous image from New York, this is kind of the same image, but it only recognized the people and the cars. And I removed everything else. And suddenly we see the complete loss of context. This is how the algorithm sees the world. This is, the view from inside the lens. And you're losing context, you're losing information, you're not getting all that extra information that we are getting. So it's sort of, it's to sort of be more sort of aware of this. So this led on to this second project I wanted to talk about, called memory compression. And as you saw with the sky, compression algorithms hate smooth gradients. And I set out to make the smoothest gradient I possibly could. So these gradients, of which this is an example, they are 48-bit gradients. So this is like 16-bit for each red, green, blue channel. And I generated whole 5-minute, 10-minute animations of these beautifully complicated, subtly moving gradients. And then I stuck them through a compression algorithm to see what would happen. And I spent a long time trying lots of different algorithms and came up with a set of 12 pieces, which is the memory compression series. So these are the beautifully smooth gradients as seen by H.264, which is what you use every day. Every time you watch a video on the internet, or some MP4 videos probably compressed with H.264. So these patterns have been introduced by the algorithm. These are the fingerprints of the compression algorithms of that are storing your memories. There's another example. But there are different algorithms, and actually, if you go back through the history of compression algorithms, there are things like Cinepack, which was huge at the time. It's not used so much these days because it's much slower, but it was one of the original sort of really good. And it gives you a completely different result. So these sort of animated pieces, they kind of give you a sort of insight into how these algorithms are working. Another one is Theora. A lot of these algorithms actually weren't that interesting, or they were quite similar. So I spent weeks like compressing these images and these videos and trying to find interesting results. H.265, which is a more modern, better compression algorithm. Again, sort of different things. So I'm going to just play you like a minute. I've no idea how long I've been going on. We're almost there. So I'm going to just play like 1 minute of one of them. But I want to say that again, these were released as on Object, and I was thinking about how people are going to come across this very slow work. They're very slow, they're very meditative, they're very, they need you to sort of be involved in it and think about the processes that are going on. So I actually thought, well, to help this along, I would write some music for each one to sort of set the scene. And so I generated the video, and then I would watch the video and record music. So sort of improvised performance for each one. So I'm just to get you into the kind of the right frame of mind. So I'm just going to play this for a minute. There's another one playing in the room out there. So. Oh, the holocaust. That's fine. You can find them on my website. Yeah. Just have my guitar. Anyway, you can sort of see the patterns as they are evolving. So all of this banding, all of this blocking, being from these being pushed to the end. So to think about the black box, to think about these sort of AI systems from the perspective of somebody who works in sort of deeply with these sort of algorithms and sort of is trying to find out what it kind of means to us as humans. Like I have a lot of trouble with AI in terms of its.
Yeah. I was looking at this afternoon, so I thought I'd just. It's actually great.
This idea of like how these things are storing memory, how AI is storing memory, how we are relating to AI as though it was a human thing that understands memory, and it does not. The black box it's outside of time. It doesn't understand the passing of time at all. It has no concept of its own death or a time when it wasn't there. It does not know that it did not know something. It either knows it or it doesn't. It doesn't understand what a fact is. It's just sort of reaffirmed through the strength of the connections. It has no innate personality. It has no key life experiences. It has not come through any trauma or loss. So these systems, I think, can be knowable. They can be not in the same way, that we know kind of computer art, that sort of control over the code, that mastery of the algorithm, but it's more a sort of feeling and sort of intuition that we can feel our way through it. But you have to spend the time to sort of sensitize yourself, which comes from a sort of artistic practice, and that's kind of what I'm working on. So, thank you very much. Sorry, I ran over.
Hello, thank you all for coming. Thanks, Alex, for that very interesting presentation. Most of the work that I do starts with an innovation, but I tend to kind of break things as I go along. I tend to kind of break things as I'm innovating. I'm quite interested in this idea of technical innovation. It kind of seems that it's a sort of a kind of an environment that we're all in as well. Perhaps even an environment we're kind of stuck in. Things are kind of constantly developing. There's always this sort of forwards motion, and so I'm kind of innovating by breaking things, which is partly just to do with my own kind of ignorance, and also partly like so we start with this series of artworks called Half Cheetah, which are reinforcement learning runners, real-time artworks. They run live, but they don't quite do what you expect them to do, I suppose. So the start of the process is to use reinforcement learning models, basically the same kinds of models that are normally used by military commercial applications for training robots. What you normally do is, before you have a robot go out into the world and learn how to interact with the world, you can speed the process up by giving it a virtual training environment in which to learn and make mistakes and so on. And so they learn very much like we do. You're given a body, and they have to learn how to move that body in space from scratch, essentially. And in this environment, obviously, time is compressed, space is simplified, so it's kind of an abstraction of learning to move. The learning curve involves many failures, and you know, again, similar to us. So this is, so on the learning curve, an actor-critic reinforcement learning model, the Q value improves over time, you know, in a fairly kind of linear way. I mean, it basically gets better, and that's what the software agents are designed to do, is to get better at things, right? I mean, that's literally encoded into their, you know, they all follow a kind of a sort of gradient towards improvement. So anyway, so I'm running these AI models, and then I'm getting snapshots of their progress through that process. So from helpless flailing about to quite efficient, almost running like predators, and then transfer those behaviors onto scans of people. So at the moment, you can buy people's body scans online. So people sell the rights to the bodies online, so I got, you know, and they're anonymized and stuff. But once you've got these scans, you can do what you want with them, basically. So you motivate them internally, however you choose. So I'm putting the AI reinforcement learning models behaviors into these bodies, and then reskinning them as well, which is a kind of further anonymization. The body is always the same skin as the environment, and you have to make some skeletal adjustments, because obviously a half cheetah you saw earlier, in the AI environment, it's literally half cheetah. So it's not like a real animal. It's not something that can even exist in the real world. It's a sort of an abstraction. And so then you have to apply that to a human body, which has different limbs and so on. So you're kind of basically sort of changing the kind of the way the body movement works. And then so take the human model, which is inhabited, motivated by these AI impulses, behaviors, and put it in a live 3D environment with motion sensors. It's all quite complicated, and then we run it live and track its movement. And what happens in this new environment is we have a second reinforcement learning model that analyzes the behavior, the body movement, the X, Y, Z coordinates in space and time, it doesn't. This model doesn't have the structure of a typical RL model. It's not improving over time. In fact, a lot of the time they kind of crash halfway through the learning process and they have to restart, or they tend towards failure and repetition. And so the progress is kind of broken down. And the learning curve is reversed. And what you end up with, and these are moving artworks, by the way. I'm showing statics here, but there is a moving version in the atrium. So what you're left with is essentially a kind of ongoing, almost like they're on a hamster wheel, but kind of it's just this sort of constant motion, basically, of failing and of getting back up again and trying again and again. And it's very interesting because I think when you watch them, they're quite physical artworks, and I think they're quite relatable as well. Like people can't help wanting them to succeed, I suppose, or sometimes people laugh at the failures as well. I mean, that's another thing. But we have all these sort of reactions. But the artworks they go on in perpetuity. They don't stop. There's no sort of like end point. They will just keep going, and so they become quite kind of, I suppose, meditative in a way. It's a certain point at which you start to become less attached to the outcomes, I think. Maybe. We had 8 of them at Abu Dhabi Art. They all run with sound as well. In Korea at Sika Museum. So this is another series of artworks. Again, like this same principle of sort of taking a technology and innovating with it, but breaking it at the same time to reveal something else. So this one is called Mass. So this is a series of abstract pieces, 3D, dynamic. They run in real time, and they all live on the blockchain. And blockchains, of course, are financial networks, they're transactional networks. They have a certain structure to them. These artworks are stored on the blockchain, and they interact with the transactional behaviors of the owners on the network. So if you buy one of these, it starts monitoring you. And it monitors all of the owners, and all of the artworks change in response to any behavior, any transaction that any one of these owners takes on the blockchain. And so in a way that it's the same space, it's a shared space. although they appear differently to each person. But rather than making it a very linear communication system where people kind of know what other people have done by, you know, looking at the interactions or the changes in the artworks, I kind of deliberately introduced a bug into the code. We put a bug into the code that essentially stops things being communicated clearly. And what that means is essentially is when you're watching one of these artworks, you're kind of like, there's a change happens, you know something has happened within the blockchain. Someone being tracked like you is has made a transaction, but you don't know what and you don't know who. You just know that someone else was there. And so that breaking down of that functionality just sort of creates a kind of a shared space, a different space. And so it's not like, you know, if you're on social media and you know certain interactions are going to be recorded and are going to be seen in certain ways, and somebody likes a post, you know, you feel rewarded, or in a game, a network game, you know there are certain goals that have to be achieved. And so each network has its structure, right? And it has its rules, and it has, you know, the blockchain is blockchains are the same as they're financial networks. But here, there's not really anything like, there's no kind of like linear order to the way in which this represents what's happening in that medium. And so people, they just become aware of the presence of the other people. And that's it, really. This was at ZKM last year and earlier this year. Art Hotel in Hoxton, Dubai, and some other pieces. And then the last one I want to show, which I'm gonna present at the EVA conference here. I'm not going to go into it in much detail, but this is slightly different because it's a series that I did based on the work of Gottfried Jaeger, who's now 89. He might be 90 now, actually. Lovely guy. And in the 60s, he made some very, very early. He innovated with generative photography. So basically creating photographs that aren't representational of something else, but are just kind of things within themselves. They're sort of generated within the apparatus of the camera. So he's essentially using a kind of pinhole system. And they're very, very interesting. This is one of the pieces, a color piece. They've been described as kind of like image objects and data objects, that they kind of, there's a sort of structure to them, a conceptual structure to them because of the geometrical design. And yet they record the impression of light on the photographic substrate and so on. And they do have this quite interesting, like almost three-dimensional sort of very singular kind of impression that they make out of just all of these many parts. So I took, with Gottfried's permission, I took these images and I digitized them and then extrude them as light maps, basically, where the intensity of light becomes a kind of landscape. And I'm also taking elements of his images and using them as textures, image textures, which are then reapplied onto the 3D objects which come from his images. And there's data loss happened in this process, but not unlike the process of photography itself. All of these objects, which are the result of his original image, in a 3D networked environment, and many variations on his original piece, because I just use one image of his and extrapolate from that. So there's dozens. You can make hundreds of different instances of the same artwork from the same image in different places, and depending on where you view the artwork, it will change, and depending on the fact of your viewing the artwork, it will change. And so views become integrated into it, and so the image is now not only a product of its construction technologically, but it's also a product of the people within the network who are interacting with it. So we showed some of them at Museum of Moving Image in New York with his original pieces, and people were able to. So people all around the world go and look at the artworks online, and they change what's seen inside the museum as well. So it kind of breaks down a sort of barrier there. But it's really, his original pieces. It's really just a kind of way of exploring how an image like that with such a strong presence, how does that, because this was made in the 60s and at the very beginning of computer art and of media art as well, that in today's landscape, the many ways in which we can manipulate images, and images obviously, between transmission and reception, there can be a million changes. Things go viral, and there's different variations. What is that single image? What does that become in this environment? It was just a way of kind of exploring that kind of journey, and sort of again kind of breaking down sort of technology in the medium.
Thank you both for two wonderful presentations, and we're just going to maybe go straight into maybe a 10-minute conversation. So I think I'll just open by addressing the question of time, temporal in both your works, and actually I could go into the whole spiel about the correspondences between both what you're doing. Given that we started from the point of view of, I think in the description you wrote, of differences, and I know maybe that was a provocation in some ways, because it would be very, very hard to go into some sort of duality in relation to that. But I have been trying to work out, well, what is James doing that Alex isn't doing, or vice versa. And I suppose what I'm currently thinking, having thought about this a bit in advance and also looking at what you're doing, I think there is a certain difference around, I don't know if you know Henri Bergson's ideas of creative evolution and duration, that we move through time, and time is this moving thing, and it's durational, continues in a sense, and there's a sort of a sense of which I think is important for your work, Alex, of almost a point of stillness that communicates itself, insofar as when I was looking at your object works this afternoon, I realized that they reminded me a bit of sort of, that state of mind you get when you're allowed to sort of really switch off and be in a spa or something. You're really allowed to just
don't have time for
it made me feel sort of, which I don't think I normally get from media art in any way whatsoever. And it's like a sort of it's not quite flotation, but there's an ambience, there's a sort of a permission to just be still. And once you are still, then the work find it's like a happening. It's not like you're trying to tell me a story or a dramatic effect or even an event-based process. It is more like a happening, you know, it's like entering a space of negation where you're in a presence, I think. And yeah, I don't feel that with James's work. With James's work, which I've written about in your book and literally quite closely towards the end of last year, it is about change and constant transformation and things being generatively networked, and it isn't necessarily at all about stillness. There might be a point at which it reaches an eventness, which we could discuss, but that is time-based and sort of much more likely to reach a stage of collapse or failure. And that's what it emotionally moves me in your work, James, is sense of not being able to keep up. Like we're all trying to keep up all the time, velocity and accelerated technological shifts. And we can't, you know, it's like one of those things that we're constantly falling short. And like for me, your work, that work, Avcita kind of embodies this perilous state of existence and what I feel on lots and lots of different levels, which makes us want to maybe benefit more from the kind of work that you make, Alex, which allows us to sort of be present in the moment and not try to be doing something that's, you know, competing or whatever. So that's in a way a response rather than questions. However, I did want to just open up, you know, the description of the event that you did give us on control, progress, and also the emphasis was on moving fast and breaking things, not slowing down and seeing what might come through. So I wondered if you might both respond to this, also the ideas of agency, autonomy, and I know it's a very rich menu, whatever you'd like to pick up on from the list of things that you said this event would be in part about.
I mean, it's the speed, you know, the moving fast is to keep up with the rate of change.
Right.
The vision of the artist as someone who can respond to a very fast changing scene where humans are not moving fast. And we are in this enviable, not enviable position of our technology moving so quickly that we are struggling with our very old brains. I mean, we haven't moved on that much since ancient Egypt, or you know, we still have the same daily concerns, and yet we're now dealing with the sort of interconnected global AI system that's you know, operating outside of the knowledge of most people, and so the moving fast and breaking things idea was very much like, how do we keep up with that as humans, as artists, as to come up with a way of creating work that helps us not necessarily understand. I mean, these are not didactic works of sort of like, oh, this is how AI works, you know, like in James's work. It's not like, oh, this will explain AI to you, or reinforcement learning. It's saying, well, what happens if we, you know, break out of the prescribed Silicon Valley sort of view of it, and actually, you know, when we get beyond the edge and we start to see, I mean, you know, many artists, digital artists, yeah, we all got to the edge of the computer, and we, you know, that's where we found the interesting area. And from my position, it's like I'm not trying to make sort of slow meditative works. I'm trying to make a sort of anti-spectacle that doesn't treat the audience as a whole. And I'm not trying to make you all go, ooh, you know, at the right time. I'm trying to get to that thing inside you, which is you. That is personal to you. You complete the system of watching the work. You have to get into the right state and allow yourself at that time.
Yeah.
This is what you're referring to. But then what it connects to, I hope, is that very personal side of you that completes the thing that I'm trying to lay out, and it's to create these pieces that set the scene in the right kind of balance, the right kind of visual and audio sort of combination to allow our sort of inner voice to speak, and so it's an audience of one. A performance for every single person And I think that everyone will have their own interpretation of it.
That's so interesting. James, did you want to come back on the
Well,
same?
yeah, I mean, it's funny because I watched The Matrix recently for like the first time in ages, and it's funny because it's like that. The Matrix actually kind of, predicted. It's kind of like you can just go back and say, with a lot of like digital art ideas, actually a lot of them were already in the Matrix. So you can kind of go, okay, well, I made this thing with reinforcement. I've got it's the Matrix, But I watched it, and it's interesting because there's this passage in it where they talk about when the computers built this system, that they left a person inside. They put a person inside, and it was like they put a human inside, right? And it was either, I think he was either a test subject, or he was like it was to kind of like make sure that it was convincing enough for people so that they would believe that the Matrix was actually real. But he was the one that actually ended up, this person was the one who ended up freeing everyone, right? So he, going around and disconnecting the things in the back of their heads and so on, right? And I just thought that's quite interesting, right? Like maybe that's actually is what we need, is just simply a human inside. I mean, so you're working with technology, you're invariably, inevitably, you're kind of part of this process of this forward motion, this journey towards exactly what destination we're not quite sure, right? But it's very difficult to make work that doesn't either fetishize the technology in some way and just become a kind of a vehicle for showing what that is, or on the other hand, I think it's very easy to become very didactic in the sense of being critical of the technology, of kind of going, okay, well, this is work that shows this about, right? This is what I'm trying to say about AI or whatever, right? Whereas I think like I get into a very long and protracted process, a struggle basically with these machines and systems. And I end up breaking things. And I think what happens as a result is I end up leaving a mark of myself. And I think it's quite a kind of self-indulgent way of looking at it. But for me, that's that mark that ends up being the thing that people can identify as authentic, that a space opens up, just simply a space opens up where there's maybe something relatable in a different way, a moment in time, and I think that it's very much about negating the technology as the central reference point. So working within the technology, but negating that being, at the center, to kind of resist that, to resist the centrality of that as a kind of concept, to uncover something else inside it.
So I'm just going to allow me to indulge myself with one more question to you both. Alex, I was really struck when you were talking about, said very, very articulately about how the algorithm sees the world and the view from inside the lens, both of which could be, you could do a whole, but it's really fascinating. So building on what James was saying about obviously not wanting to be technocentric, falsely post-utopian kind of way. Nevertheless, you both grew up at a time, you really came into like your teenage years when writing software, you were really part of that growth and emergence. It's part of your life. It's not just a thing that came along later. And so the algorithm for you and being able to show us things that algorithmically are not visible to the human, how the algorithm sees, that is in a sense trying to almost empathetic with the software. It's like, why would you want to do that? What is it that you would hope would be evoked by enabling us to perceive what we cannot see, but perhaps an algorithm can?
There's I mean, there's sort of multiple level. I mean, yeah, I started programming. I was like 8 years old, and it was like, and I had this Sinclair ZX81. It was this tiny little PG, plugged it into the TV, and it was a little. It didn't even have a proper keyboard or anything. And you would plug a tape recorder into the side to save and load programs. And mine was defective, and the save and load didn't work. And so we phoned up Sinclair, and we were like, can we get another one? I said the backlog is like 2 months or something, which like to an 8-year-old on summer holidays is like forever. So I just lived with it, and I typed a program in, and when I want a new program, I would take the power out and type it in again. And if I wanted to use that program again, I would type it in again. And you learn to program pretty quickly when you do that. But it was what I saw in that process was the externalization of, kind of control in a sort of new aesthetic, in a new this new system that I was just completely infatuated with and just totally fascinated with. So it's partly like I want to convey that 8-year-old excitement that I still feel when I'm working with digital technology. But at the same time, I'm incredibly aware that people generally are being very left behind by technology because of this black box kind of thing. We're losing the ability to have independent control of our technologies. Like it's great we can pay, whatever, £20 a month and have all these an AI system, but it can turn that off in a second. You have no ownership, no control. And it's very different. I've spoken for years about digital preservation, about, I've spent years making software systems for digital preservations, and nobody wants to hear about it because it's very difficult and boring and complicated, and it's not fun, because it's much more fun to have a system that you pay £20 a month for and you can just play with. But it's not fun when they turn it off, and Google has a history of doing this, and we're going to see AI systems collapse and go away, and you are not in control, and that's such a difficult sell to tell people, because they're all like, shut up, we don't want to hear. But there is a beauty, joy, truth in having control of your system. So I'm not saying, we all have to go and use like open source Linux or something. It's just be aware. That's a message in so many of my works, is just be aware of what the system is doing, how they're operating, where the control is coming from, how much you are devoting your life and knowledge to, and just, as long, like, I'm not saying don't use AI or anything, but just be aware of what the relationship is. And they turn off systems that many digital artists use, like when they got rid of Macromedia Flash, on the internet, and they don't care about art, and they don't care about artists, because we don't actually generate enough money as a relatively small group, so they will just turn things off. This will happen again and again. So soapbox moment. But I feel incredibly passionate about conveying that message to people, just so so you're aware of the relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, we're just give me a we live within these networks, and increasingly a lot of the systems that organize our behavior physically, socially, culturally are they're owned by these large corporations, or they're managed by governmental surveillance and so on, and not only are they networks in the material sense control, but also in the sense of meaning, you know, that our sense of meaning derived now from these networks of, you know, signifiers and directors and you know, end points and end goals and so on, that you're not in control of. And so it's very interesting to me, this idea of, you know, how do you find some sense of autonomy in the face of all of that? And yeah, I think that we're in a kind of process of freeing ourselves also from the kind of the control of those ideas and that system of meaning that is being built around us minute by minute, you know.
Great. So just before we open up to the floor, I just want to say how wonderful this is, such an echo of what Gustav Metzger, as one of the co-founders of the Computer Arts Society, would have, I think if he was here, he would have been, you know, praising me for picking up on all of this. I mean, Gustav notoriously referred to cybernetic serendipity as a technological playground. However, he did want to be in it. And, you know, so there's always been this sort of sense of, is experimentation and play the end, or are there bigger issues? And if you look back at, you know, what he was writing about automation as a thing that's been around for a long time, it's just now coming into its apotheosis in a sense. So those issues that you're raising, I think, are completely at the heart of why the Computer Arts Society was set up. Certainly the Gustav strand of it. And so I think we, you know, should really welcome it. He would have been 100 on Friday had he lived. So so on that note, let's perhaps ask if there are any questions or thoughts from those in the room and those online. Thank you.
I have a question. In lots of discussions about art and AI, there's always the topic that it's killing creativity, you know, and the critique. And I was actually wanted to hear from you what is the beauty of working with AI in your work? I mean, you have such a history of working with algorithms, and could you talk about, what has changed your practice, or makes it even more interesting maybe for you to work with these systems?
Yeah, okay, so I've been working with AI models of various kinds since about 2012, and the first time I used them, it was actually a project for the brand Dove, where we got a model to analyze images of women's hair and the labels that had been attached to them. And the model learned society's prejudices about women's appearance and identification. So it would sort of make judgments like, well, this is not a professional woman, or this is not an Antagonist. We showed it to, and Dove obviously as a brand is, you know, they're kind of in sort of real beauty and stuff. We showed the AI's output to real women, and a lot of them had a good laugh actually. I mean, you know, but I mean, LLMs, you know, they're not really kind of central to my practice. I use Claude a bit. My relationship with AI, it's kind of similar, I suppose, to a lot of the technologies. It's problematic. Yes, of course, there is beauty in it. And I think, you know, the kind of stuff Alex is doing, or, you know, the kind of stuff Terence Broad is doing, for example, you know, where building your own data sets and kind of developing your own models and so on, you know, it's far more interesting to me than using commercial tools. I think, like, for example, there was a whole wave of very surreal looking art that came out, you know, over the last few years, which was the result of, as far as I can see, not a kind of surrealist impulse coming out of some, you know, like the real surrealism was about really overturning people's assumptions, right, and kind of challenging something in society. Whereas I think it's the AI-based surrealism that's come out recently from these text-to-image models is the result of the simply default characteristic of most of these image models was that they were unable to complete image merging in a perfect way, that they were just not very well developed models. And so it was basically surrealism by default, you know, and that's my view on it. So
I love LLMs. I find they're very they're like what I kind of wanted search engines to be, you know, more textual search engine. And I use AI in coding in as much as if I have to write another bit of code that opens a window or does a menu or does that kind of boilerplate stuff, I will die. And so it's great because it frees me from doing all of the boilerplate code up to the point where I'm writing the algorithm that actually makes the art. And I'm, of course, there's many artists doing absolutely, brilliant things with AI and exploring all these avenues. Where it falls down for me is that thing that I was talking about, where you don't, you're achieving results that you haven't earned in a way. And I was watching Jurassic Park the other day, and it's, Jurassic Park covers everything. But they were saying, you're sort of standing on the shoulders of giants, and you're sort of, using this technology to produce things, but you haven't actually earned the understanding of what you're creating. And I think it's very cinematic in a way. If you look at a film, like a Hollywood film, and you look in the background, and everything there is just there so you don't look at it. It's there to reinforce the idea that it's an apartment in New York in 1950. It's there to be a space station. It's there to be, whatever scene. And people spend a lot of time designing these things in the background that the brain won't object to. And if you look at AI generative images, it's doing exactly the same thing. And obviously partly because it's trained on all this stuff, it's generating mush in the background that has no function and no purpose, but looks, for all intents and purposes, acceptable to your brain. And I think the lack of intention in that is staggering. That we would accept that as a choice, because we're so fixated on the main characters. So like someone like Ridley Scott in Alien, he designed everything in the background. It was all very well thought out. It was all very considered. And it's that mastery that we're just kind of making available to people who aren't aware that is a thing. And so there's, as I said, there's plenty of brilliant AI stuff, but there's also this kind of leap that is not, I don't hear it talked about so much, but I think if you look at the parallel between film and that stuff, it's really obvious.
I've got a question from online, if you can hear me.
Serious voice.
Yes, please speak.
There's a few questions that have come in. One of the first ones is for Alex, and it's to do with the image compression. And I'd like to hear, the person would like to hear your reflections on edges, segmentation, and classification in your work, which is, I assume, when you show your images and there are bands arriving, becoming segmented into a lower number of colours. But
that's a very basic algorithm, which was tried. It's not a very perceptual algorithm because it produces a very artificial result. It's like when you're working with color palettes of like 16 colors, 8 colors, and you get this severe banding. It's not perceptually a very pleasing result. That tension of the classification system. I use one called YOLO, which is and these sort of data sets which are they're publicly available, and they've all been trained a set of images which obviously have their own biases and their own. So it's coming down again to like, what do we throw away? What information is recognized by the classifier as important, and what is recognized as less important and can be disposed of through compression and
that leads on to the next question, which was related, which is what about semantic loss and compression, rather than just visual information, but actual meaning for an AI generated image? There is semantic loss, and when they're curated or analyzed, what we'll do is come down to what is sufficient, which he terms compression to the mundane. You're sort of losing any richness of information. And then
if you look at these things, I mean, it's incredible what it's doing. Like it can actually trace the outline of a person, but it will classify it as a person, and there's no distinction between people. And again, it kind of goes to that backstory. Like, you've all got your backstory. You're all rich stories in yourselves, and like, that's just gone. You know, that compression of like, you are a person sitting on a chair in a room is kind of the data point that you're reduced to. And again, making those processes explicit to say this is how the computer, this particular algorithm is seeing you, is that you're not carrying across all that depth of who you are. And this has great implications in terms of how your data is processed online, and how your insurance is calculated. I don't know, sort of, it leaks into all these systems. But it's yeah. I mean, that's the level that we're at. It's not looking at your fashion yet that much.
Thank you. What about back to the room again for any other questions?
I'm thinking about the question earlier and the debate that we see a lot these days about AI and creativity, specifically LLM generated artwork, and if it's creative, where the ownership lies in it. And I was thinking about how you each use different programs to create art, maybe you choose the different algorithms that you're using, and how someone doesn't know how to use those programs could achieve a similar thing by prompting an LLM to do it. Could do it either by saying, step by step, perform these specific steps using the algorithm, or here's the kind of general concept that I'm looking for, the outcome that I'm looking for, and then it will make those decisions. And I'm curious what you think about the distinction between the two approaches to creating the same way.
I think that, for me anyway, process is a very important part of what I'm doing. I think for Alex as well, actually, the process is what, I don't think you have something authentic without the process. I think that for me anyway, is how I arrive at something that I feel is authentic. But that's not to say, and also to go back to your question, Sabine, as well, there are people using the text to image generators in really interesting ways. There's a lot of female artists, especially actually, who are inquiring into female identity, image, and so on, and specifically using the text to image, the prompt generated, as a kind of almost like a kind of pop art mechanism. So sort of saying, okay, well, this is the environment I'm in. How do I then turn that towards my own goals, right? How do I then, use the surrealism of that, or the kind of strangeness of that, the kind of uncanniness of it, and so on, to look at my own image, or to look at, and not only feminist issues as well, but yeah, I notice in particular, for some reason, with the female artists seem to be generating a lot of really interesting work using using AI models.
Alex, did you want to respond to that question as well? I think, were you also suggesting could AI do what they're doing? Is that partly what you were asking?
I mean, not to negate what you're doing.
I think
but
that's a good question.
especially with like, MCPs these days, theoretically, I could connect it to a software that I'm using. And I'm following the same steps, but instead of saying I want to use this algorithm to get this goal, I say I want this goal. Now choose the algorithm that I should be using for it.
It's a difficult proposition. Again, it comes down to you don't know how much you're skipping over. You don't know how much the journey means to you personally. Like if you spent 10 years doing that, and I'm not suggesting that you should have to or would do, but if you spent 10 years learning C++ or or OpenGL systems or some sort of like some area of computer programming, you really got in there and you really learned the kind of the base level stuff, it will change your thinking. It will change like how you think about things and how you structure things and how you approach things. And to not have that, and again, it's a very difficult sell. How can I sit here now and say, no, don't use AI, go and spend 10 years learning programming and don't earn anything for those 10 years until you're good enough as junior prompter. But it's you're not learning or having the opportunity to develop a personal way of interfacing with these things. So if you could probably create one of my artworks using an LLM, but that you've seen, but would you be able to do one that I haven't done yet? Because are you able to think through the problems that I'm thinking through? It's not just a technical implementation, it's a lifelong study of a thing. And I think that's not to say that these things are not without value or not important or not good. It's just it's a very different proposition to having a long-term deep mastery of a thing. And I'm still learning every day.
Can I just propose then this comes down to the pleasure of the artist, the beauty of creating?
It's terribly hard work, and it's ripping me out from my very body. This is fun.
Why don't you create an AI Alex May, just put your feet up, retire. Let the robot get on with it.
Because it's the struggle that makes the art. And if I wasn't struggling, I would be doing you all a terrible disservice. I am in service to the art, not the other way around.
I have another question.
I wanted to ask James about the project you were showing with reinforcement learning.
Yeah.
Just if you can share like the technical side, how you created that. I'm trying to create something like that for dance purpose.
Okay.
Is that in Unity, in the game engine?
So the beginning of the process is using DM control, which is a DeepMind model that runs in MuJoCo, which is the 3D environment that contains the physics and so on. And that's the first part of the process. And you need to run something like that on a big server, AWS server or whatever, but it's not too heavy in terms of energy use. But and then later parts of it we used 3JS actually, and then we have a JavaScript RL model running in 3JS. And it has like a kind of a reward function and a Q value and all of that stuff. I mean, it's a simplified version. It's not as complex as DM control, but it's good enough to do what it does. But yes, it starts off very complex and then just kind of gets simpler and simpler and simpler, and then breaks obviously.
Yeah, I was just wondering. So, Alex, when it came to selling the artworks on Object, did you notice any weird sort of traits or features of the works that sold versus those that didn't? And then, James, I'm just curious to know, I think it was Mass, did you have any additional like bugs or like Easter egg equivalents when people on the blockchain interacted with another person who also happen to have bought their own sort of like tracker, I guess? And if not, would you?
I think I wasn't kind of tracking it.
Alex, I think my mic's gone.
That's fine.
That's okay.
Because the initial sale was not necessarily the be all and end all, because it was really about like, the sort of how the secondary sales sort of developed as that would take the stories kind of further. So some of them, kind of sold just a few like initially. Then people kind of just got into it as a daily thing, and so I don't know if that negated some of the sort of choice in it. Obviously, I wasn't forcing anyone to do it, but they just kind of enjoyed the daily collection. I think weirdly, the one that sold the most was actually a picture of Jeff at the back with the poor Jeff, because I actually, even though the images I think of the landscapes and sort of more a scene turned out very poetically. Portraits are absolutely hideous, and I did one with James as well.
You did
it sold quite well, but Jeff's one, which is not flattering.
Photographed in the atrium.
It was just in a actually sold the most, and so he's now infamous.
That's surprising to you.
Yes. But so yeah, I wasn't. I mean, it was really. I did it for 150 days consistently, and it was really to kind of push myself creatively to open up as many channels of kind of ideas and things. So I was never sort of they like blue ones, like one for the beach or they varied a lot and stuff like that. But it was I couldn't tell you if there was, apart from the lovely Jeff one, there wasn't really a pattern or something that I said.
It's a really good idea, and I didn't do that. No, I mean there are, there's I did a few different series on the blockchain. There was one series called Gold, which was literally, it was very self-referential. It was all the artworks change in response to their own secondary market, basically. It didn't have that kind of interpersonal, immediate kind of thing. It was much more just about, this was like, during, one of the more kind of intense periods of the whole sort of NFT boom. Gold was basically, it was just this way of sort of putting the market inside the artworks and just kind of going, well, this sells for a higher price or a lower price, or somebody sends it to someone, or there's fewer sales, more sales, whatever. It changes these quite bright, optimistic, quite nice looking scientific sort of pieces that they kind of the whole artwork as a system of meaning is entirely tied into its market. Yeah.
I'm wondering if you, or Alex, if you, because I'm also interested in how the JPEG compression compresses and how it differentiates different frequencies. And I'm wondering, because I've been trying to dig up more about dithering, image dithering as a compression algorithm, and I'm wondering if you have any artists or resources around that, or if you've used it in your image making.
Yeah, love dithering, and it's interesting to go back to is some of those early algorithms like the Floyd Steinberg dithering. You cannot implement them in shaders because shaders are they're running multiple passes at the same time, so they're doing sort of blocks of pixels, and the Floyd Steinberg actually needs you to do pixel by pixel and accumulate value across the whole image, and you can't I found that fun anyway. But again, it's a kind of perceptual thing, because obviously the whole point of dithering was that we had very limited color palettes. You know, it could be black and white, or it could be like, you know, just a few colors. And it was a way to perceptually kind of add complexity rather than compress it, because actually dithering increase, it's less easy to compress. So it's a choice to, it's kind of like a balance between the perceptual quality versus compressibility, which was a big issue when we had very slow internet. But obviously these days is less, and it's more done through a sort of stylistic choice. But there are hundreds of different algorithms for doing it. I looked to see not too long ago actually whether there was something I could do with it, and I did spend a couple of weeks getting back into dithering and stuff. But it didn't quite work. I ended up writing a sort of weird program, but it just looked really, really ugly, and I never did anything with it.
Yeah, I don't like dithering. I just get straight to the point.
Finally, dithering, I love it. So, Jeff, I don't want to ignore online.
Yeah, I've got a quick question of mine actually. Just a quick one for James, which is that a lot of your work is abstract and network art, say, in a nutshell. But Half Cheetah is figurative. So you said you want to put the humanity back into the system, the matrix, whatever. So do you think you do more figurative work in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I don't just do abstract work. I mean, I have done a lot, and I do think that there's this kind of very, very interesting space between the abstract and the figurative. I think this is a similar question that I asked William Latham last time, actually, and he gave a similar response. But I think that it's hard. It's hard talking about the human. I think that figurative work is a way, in some ways, is easier to relate to within a digital context. I think that sometimes it's quite easy for people who are not familiar with digital work or computer generated work to see abstract digital art and to see it as quite cold. But I think that is possibly a problem that will be solved in time, because I think that so a lot of the time you see digital artists using figurative elements, I think, as a kind of reference point, as a way of making their work relatable, so that there's something human, literally something human within a technological context. But I don't think you need that, you know, like, I don't think you necessarily need that. It's just, I think it's maybe an artifact of, you know, it's a kind of result of people, of a lot of viewers not spending so much time in that environment, or somehow being put off by the screen, because usually they see the screen as a kind of outputter of certain kinds of data and certain kinds of information. So yeah, I think I don't think that you necessarily need to do it one way or the other, for it to have something human at the center.
Okay, well, on that note, unless there's anything that anybody,
sorry, I did have, I'm sorry about that. I had one question. I was kind of formulating it as you were speaking as well, and I've been chewing over it all day actually. So it's a bit meandering, and you'll have to forgive me. I know it's the last one, so I'll try not make it too long. But I think it goes back to your statement about pleasure and reason, I suppose, essentially why the artist would engage in these domains. And I think in asking what contribution art might make in the critique of computational reason, we do actually get to the heart of our issues and concerns with technology. I think there is a difference between, of course, AI generated imagery and then the artist working within the limitations and the technological materials available at the time. And I was wondering if you might be able to comment on if you do agree that you're working within rather than merely with technological materials, to what ends do you think that might encourage emancipatory projects in the future, and how that kind of generates a philosophical gap or a critical gap between these networks that we interface with day by day, and also what it might mean to work within technology rather than merely with the materials.
I do feel like I work within technology. I mean, but that, I think it's, you know, it's part of the process. As I was saying, it's like there's a process you go through where I mean, personally, I do feel kind of surrounded by it, you know? And so then I'm trying to work out, find some kind of neat way out, which is not, I don't think that's necessarily right, but certainly once I'm engaged in the process, I'm trying to find the end point. You know, I don't know, yeah. Is it, you know, I think, you know, but as I say, I mean, my practice is quite kind of antagonistic, you know, within that context. But I just think like it's really important that that we have ways of connecting with each other that aren't defined on those terms, you know. So whether you build that completely away from that environment or whether you build it inside it, I don't, you know, that's a choice, isn't it? I happen to be building inside it, and I think it's yeah, it's quite, you know, it's similar to Alex's, like I'm a junkie for it, you know, for all the tech, you know. So that, I suppose that's you know, that's why I ended up doing it that way.
You're within it. I think so. Well, no, Sumi?
I guess it's been such a big part of my life. It's been such a source of deep interest that, you know, the thing about, you know, programming and stuff is there's so much in there that you will never see, you know, like the beautiful structures and code and things, that systems that fit together and how they work, and it's very, if it all runs, you will never notice it because it won't break, and it's just wonderful. But there's a it's the part where it interfaces to the human and what we do with it and how it changes us and how it's mediating so much of our day-to-day interactions, what it means to be human. I mean, you know, communication apps, dating apps, you know, taking pictures, videos, recording everything that we kind of do, and we're choosing to do this, and I think it's great, and I use these tools all the time. But it's an extension of ourselves. It takes us beyond our abilities. It's like any technology, you know, the telescope allows us to look at things way beyond our physical abilities, and all these technologies are sort of doing that. They're extending our humanness, and when we lose contact with the humanness, the technology no longer is really of any use to us. And that I think is the cutting edge in art. Because if you're, you know, a computer can generate an image to its own rules, that means nothing to people, and is not aesthetically valuable, not compositionally valuable, cannot be treated through any traditional or formal artistic structure, and has no redeeming value for that humans could find. But a computer could generate that, and it would be as valid as generating an image which we think is very nice. Thank you very much. So it's a measure of our humanness and how we make these tools and how we relate to these tools that will define our relationship with them going forward. And artists are often there, you know, in the vanguard things and, you know, trying to figure out what the hell's going on and what it means. So,
Fantastic. Let's join in thanking.